2007, I was a freshman going on my sophomore in college, and my brother Martin was still in high school. We have two much younger siblings, so at the time, they were around elementary school age. My parents decided to take a cruise for their 20th wedding anniversary that year, so my brother and I were voluntold to watch my younger brother and sister, Cole and Charlotte. My brother's best friend, Christian, stayed with us while my parents were gone, and he helped us plan fun activities with the younger siblings. One idea they were particularly excited about was a camping trip, as my family had never been particularly outdoorsy in the past. Their eyes lit up at the prospect of cooking our dinner over a campfire and fishing in the stream. Since it was early summertime, we had the great luck of warm but not too hot weather, and a beautiful, clear sky for stargazing. Finally packed and ready for a somewhat long drive to the mountains, we checked into our campsite before dark, and Cole and Charlotte helped us to set up the tent. It was strange, but there were no other people at the campground, which was unusual for this time of year. Once we finished dinner, the young brother and sister were ready to sleep, so Martin, Christian, and I stayed awake a little longer, catching up and getting things ready for the next morning. Suddenly, a white Astrovan pulled up into the camping spot directly next to ours. He had dozens to choose from, but chose to park right next to us. "Oh well," Christian said. "At least we have company now." He called out a quick hello to the new neighbor, with no response back. I got an uneasy feeling almost immediately, but decided to push it aside and continue to get the fishing poles ready for the morning, and put the food away for the night to ward off bears and wild animals. Over the next hour or so, things started to get weird. The man parked next to us got out of his van to sit at the picnic table with only a small fire. From our roaring fire, I could see that he was just looking directly at us. However, his fire died out completely several minutes later, and he continued just sitting there. I could feel him staring, but I couldn't see his face anymore. He was just sitting there, breathing. Christian and Martin noticed that I was uneasy, and they picked up on how creepy the situation started to become. Martin whispered, "Why is he breathing like that? I don't feel safe anymore." I told Christian and Martin that I was going to stay awake because I didn't trust this guy. As soon as they moved from the fire into their tents, the man rose from his picnic table and started moving towards us. I called out, "Hello?" with no response from him. Finally, in a whim of panic, I demanded that we pack up and get the fuck home immediately. Christian and Martin got out of their tents and saw the figure of the man just standing there, staring at us, breathing hard. We tried to stay as quiet and calm as possible while we packed up, to not alarm Cole and Charlotte. Finally, throwing everything into the trunk, we drove away, not looking back. Before leaving the site itself, I asked if we could go to the check-in area at the lodge to see what the hell was going on and see if they knew anything more. What was this guy's deal? But to my surprise, there was no one else registered at the campsite that evening. The story doesn't end there, though. About 6 months later, I was in my sophomore year of school when a local hiker went missing in a county over from where we camped and where I went to college. She was doing something so normal, hiking with her dog. Sadly, she turned up several months later, murdered and found in a white Astro van. When the news finally released photos of the van and the man's face, I knew it was him. I got a phone call from both my brother and his friend, and they recognized him too. We came to find out that it wasn't his first murder several years later, and he became known as the National Forest serial killer. I sincerely mean it when I say that I'm an incredibly cautious camper now because of this encounter. Thinking that it could have been us, or my younger siblings, still gives me nightmares to this day. We recently had a reunion, Christian, Martin, and I, and we talked about what happened to us with more than 10 years gone by. It's amazing we all remembered the details as they are etched in our memories forever. So, creepy, heavy breathing, would-be serial killer, camping neighbor, let's never meet. Ever. Years ago, when I was still a teenager, my friend Justin and I would often go longboarding at night, as my friends and I were quite the night owls. We loved the freedom of almost never seeing another soul on the roads or the paths that we frequented. Even when using main roads, it would be very rare to see a car out so late in such a rural area, and you could see and hear them coming from very far away due to their headlights and the noise of the vehicle disrupting the peaceful silence of the night. We were really into it at the time and would often ride our boards for miles and miles, sometimes not arriving home until the sun was up. One particular night, we decided to ride a few miles away from our usual back roads to take one of our favorite hidden routes. It began with a narrow paved path that was the only piece of land separating two sides of a long lake. It would often sink under due to rain, and we wanted to seize the opportunity to use it before it rained and went underwater again. It was roughly 2 miles long and was extremely relaxing to ride through due to the scenery. After making it to the end of the lake, we decided to continue moving and turn into a very close path that leads directly into a densely wooded wilderness preservation. As we came up the first hill, we looked down at the bottom into the blackness. We both noticed what appeared to be a tiny moving ball of dim light down there. It moved so strangely, and it was extremely difficult to make out what it was. Rather than shine our flashlight down, we curiously watched it for a few more moments, whispering to each other about what it could possibly be. All at once, that small light turned into multiple blinding lights and extremely loud revving sounds, overwhelming our senses that had become accustomed to the dark and silence. Acting purely on fear, we instantly turned around and ran as fast as we could, hearing yelling and revving gaining behind us. By sheer luck, we managed to roll off the path into a very dark, very overgrown hole in the side of a hill, overlooking where we had just come from. We decided to hide in the natural dugout of this hill, hoping the plants and darkness would be enough to protect us from whatever was happening out there. We watched our pursuers right up to where we had originally been standing. There were 4 men, 2 on 4-wheelers and 2 on full-sized motorcycles. They were yelling at each other about something, but we couldn't make out what they were saying due to the distance we had covered. We felt safe enough to whisper very softly to each other and speculated who these people could be. Our first thought was that they could be park rangers of some kind, although we had never seen one here in the many times we had been through, and honestly, we doubted that this county had the budget or even the desire to have one patrol the deep woods at night. Besides that, these men were on vehicles entirely inappropriate for the paved bike trails, and they were very angry about something. They called out to us for a while, yelling things like, "We know you're out there," and "We can see you, come on out." We stayed silent and decided to call their bluff instead of running. Eventually, we clearly heard one of the men yell, "Find them now!" and smash a bottle. That had erased any hope that these were just park rangers. We watched them split up, each of them going a different way down the series of paths on their vehicles, including the path we came from. It took us what felt like ages to even move. We were frozen in terror inside that dugout, watching the lights from the vehicles travel through the woods and paths, one of them already coming full circle and passing the point he started from. I thought about calling for help, but I was too afraid to open my phone, in fear that even the smallest amount of light would give away our location. After waiting for the lights of the vehicles to reach their farthest distance yet, we finally summoned the nerve to get up and try to run somewhere far enough from these people to safely make a call. We ran as hard and fast as we could through the woods. Since their headlights gave away their location on the paths, we would hide again whenever we felt that they were getting too close. Our available hiding spots were getting progressively worse as the woods became less dense, and the fear I felt waiting for one of them to drive past us while basically only being covered in leaves and plants may still be unmatched to this day. Finally, we emerged from the woods onto the intersection of the 2 main roads, far from where we started. We dug down into the ditch to call for help. When I opened my phone, I noticed I had recent missed calls from one of our other friends, Connor. who we were supposed to meet up with after our longboard excursion. I called him and frantically asked where he was. Luck was with us again. He hadn't given up on our plans despite us ignoring him, and was only a few miles away, already heading in our direction. I gave him the names of the 2 streets that we were near the corner of, and explained that we needed to be picked up right away. He agreed to speed over to us while Justin and I waited in hiding. Thankfully, Connor arrived before any of those men did. We bolted into the back seats of his car, yelling for him to get out of there, and he took off. Relief doesn't begin to describe what I felt being safely driven home after everything I just experienced. After explaining everything that happened to Connor, we ended up just moving on with our night and decided not to call the police. We figured they would be gone by the time any officer made it out there, and that we would only be putting ourselves at risk by admitting to breaking the law by taking those paths so late at night. I still have no idea what happened or who those people were. I've been told all kinds of theories from friends and family that have heard this story. Some think we walked right up to a huge drug deal. Justin and I later admitted to each other that when the revving started, we couldn't see. Our minds went straight to chainsaw-wielding horror movie serial killer, so I suppose it could have been much worse. Frustratingly enough, whatever those men thought we saw that made them want to catch us so badly, we never actually saw. We'll never really know, I suppose. I live in Southern Oregon, a beautiful place in the West filled with some of the most beautiful forests one will ever see. The national forest that I live against, I know like the back of my hand. I know stories from long ago about places in the middle of nowhere that have strange names, and that often draws me to these places to explore and feel nostalgic. These forests also have things about them that are off. Locals talk about how people disappear all the time in the woods. Sometimes over drugs, sometimes over foul play, and other times people just go for a hunt or hike and are never seen again. I've spent several years in the deep wilderness hiking almost every day. The incident I'm about to tell you changed how I felt about the forest. My roommate and I left our home on the outskirts of the forest for a hike to a place that's basically a swamp flat, a small area of marshy swamp in a bowl-like canyon high up in the mountains. There's one road in and one road out. As we climbed the mountain, the rain had started to pick up. It had been mostly drizzling that day, but living in the Pacific Northwest, you get used to that, and it doesn't stop you from adventure. We finally get up to the flats, and it's time to explore. We walk the trail into the flats, and as we admire the old growth trees surrounding the marsh, the wind starts to pick up. There was a nasty storm coming in. The trees started to rock back and forth and make horrible snapping sounds. And there isn't many safe places in a forest like this to take shelter from falling trees and branches. So we decided it was time to hike out. We hiked back to the car and were relieved to get in it and out of the storm. The car was parked in a small turnout on the side of the road. We sat there for a few minutes in the car, taking off our jackets and turning the heat on and such. That's when the truck pulled up. In the middle of a bad storm, in the complete middle of nowhere, a really old beat-up pickup truck drives up and parks in front of our car, not completely blocking the car, but coming damn near close. A burly man steps out of the driver's seat and turns and looks at us. I have to say, this is the only time in my entire life that I have thought to myself, something here isn't right. The look on the guy's face gave me that instinctual feeling of fight or flight. As we watch him walk around his truck, I tell my roommate, "Go, just go, start the car and leave, now." As he starts the car and begins to pull off, the man was reaching behind the seat of his truck and pulls out a long rifle. That's when my roommate hits the gas and flew out of there. As we pull away, the man pulls the gun out and points it in our direction and looks me right in the eyes. The feeling I got was, you were going to die today. I will never forget the look on his face. We got home, told our neighbors about the incident, and proceeded about our day. When we got in the car the next morning to drive to town, the starter failed on the car. I often think to myself, had it failed up there, or had that bad storm not come in and shoot us away, things could have very well gone south that day. Here's a bit of relevant context for the post. I grew up about 15 miles outside of downtown Portland, in a semi-rural area. We live on a windy country road in the hills, where the homes were spread quite a distance apart. Our closest neighbor was maybe a 10-minute walk away. Our house was set back off the road and had a gravel driveway that took a sharp turn, so you couldn't see the house from the road, and vice versa. One warm spring day when I was 10, I was riding the bus home from school. As the bus squeaked to a stop in my driveway, I looked out the window to my left and saw a man in a gray pickup idling aside the road, parked perpendicular to my driveway, almost blocking it. Being so young, I thought nothing of it, but when I got to the front of the bus, the driver held her arm out, blocking me from going any further. "Do you recognize that truck or that man?" I told her no. At that point, she opened her sliding window and motioned for him to move along. He looked at her and then looked back ahead and didn't move. He wasn't looking at a map or anything, just sitting there. The bus driver then got the intercom and told him he needs to move along, but he continued to stay there. Then she said, "Sir, you best move along. I'm not going anywhere until you're out of here." He finally left, and after a few minutes, the bus driver let me out, and she said she would wait several minutes for me to get up the driveway to my home. I told my mom what happened as soon as I got home, and the next morning she came with me to catch the bus and to thank the bus driver. I believe she gave her some sort of gift, but I'm not sure exactly. After that incident, my mom and stepdad hollowed out a section of the trees at the end of the driveway as a hiding spot. In that spot, my siblings and I could watch the road while waiting for the bus in the mornings, while nobody could see us. Anyway, this incident gives me chills when I think back. If my bus driver hadn't been so vigilant in looking out for me, and if that man in the pickup had been up to no good, I would have been a goner. Right after my driveway, there's a sharp turn and a steep downhill, and the bus would have been out of sight within seconds. There would have been no witnesses. This is a story about an old neighbor of mine. Me and my husband and 2 young kids moved into an old fixer-upper house back in the summer of 2015. I was in college full-time, and my husband agreed to stay home with the kids until I graduated, and we would slowly work on doing the house up, etc. Anyway, it was situated in a very small sleepy village in the countryside in Ireland. Everyone knew each other, and everyone knew your business. We had a neighbor called Johnny. He was a loner. The only living family members he had was a brother named Thomas, and he had no friends. He was an ex-alcoholic, but I still had a strong suspicion that he drank heavily most nights. He was a clean freak. Well, the outside was immaculate. His grass was the greenest, softest grass I ever saw, and nobody could touch it, or he would come outside yelling at you to get off his property. He had expensive garden statues, and it was like a lawn out of a fancy magazine. But inside, his house was dark and filthy. The floor tiles were black with dirt, and his ceiling was yellow from smoking cigarettes indoors and never opening the windows. His appearance was always unkempt, and he had bulging eyes and a demeanor of someone about to explode with rage. The day we moved in, he walked into our front garden and introduced himself in a rough way.
"I'm Johnny. I live next door. I've been living here 66 years, 8 months, and 21 days. Who are you two?"
Me and my husband thought he was a weirdo from the get-go, but were polite and explained that we just bought the house and planned to make it our family home. Then he said nobody should have ever bought in that house, that it was his late sister's house who had died many years ago when she was a young woman. We were taken aback by this, but said sorry to hear that, etc. He then turned and walked away, but stopped abruptly at the gate and said in a rage-filled voice,
I cut the grass every second day at 10 a.m. Take care of this lawn and mine. Don't ever touch the grass.
Okay, sure, we said, not really thinking he's actually going to be serious about this now that we live here. I'm sure he'll just let us cut our own grass, etc. And we laughed it off. Turns out he was very serious. Every morning at 10 a.m., we would hear his lawnmower start up, and there he was, cutting the grass whilst muttering angrily and looking around, wild-eyed. My husband often went outside and told him, "Hey, it's okay, I'll do it." But Johnny would continue as if he couldn't see him. Johnny was also a hunter. He had 2 dogs he would bring with him, and he also owned a hunting shotgun. This freaked me out, as guns are rarely seen in Ireland, especially to be in the hands of someone so unstable. Then the really strange stuff happened. We were cleaning out the attic upstairs. We had all the trash to dump in the front garden, and Johnny storms into our garden yelling.
What are you doing?
He marched into the hallway and said to never ever go near the attic. My husband got annoyed at this point and told him to leave us alone. It's our house, and we'll do what we want. Johnny freaked out screaming. His dead sister's clothes are up there, and all her belongings, even her old-fashioned bicycle, and to never touch them, as they're not ours. Needless to say, we ignored him and put the stuff outside, and told him if he wants them that much, to take them into his own house. He stormed off and looked back at us, laughing maniacally. He freaked me out, but my husband said it's just some weirdo and not to take notice of him. The next day, the rubbish removal company were due to come and collect the stuff we decided to dump. We were surprised to see that the pile of old belongings was untouched all day. The following day arrived, and when we awoke, all the belongings were gone. No surprise as who took them. 2 days later, we didn't hear his lawnmower. We didn't so much as see him for 3 whole weeks. Then one day, while my husband was out of town, I was alone with the kids, and they wanted to go outside and play soccer. We went, but discovered all their soccer balls had kitchen knives stuck in them. Needless to say, I got freaked out and called my husband, who said to call the police, but I didn't think there was anything that they could do. That night, I barely slept. I lay awake terrified. Johnny was behind all of this. The next morning, I went downstairs early, and there Johnny was, stood in his backyard at around 5 a.m. It was still dark outside, and it was raining, but there was Johnny yelling.
Don't touch her clothes, Tommy. I'll kill you, Thomas. I'll kill you. Don't look at me like that with your sinful stare.
Again, I was pretty unnerved, and I felt like I shouldn't be seeing this, so I tried my hardest not to listen as I went to the living room. Later that day, I heard Johnny start up his lawnmower as I was in the backyard with my best friend, who decided to come visit for the day. Johnny saw us both in the backyard and stopped in his tracks.
You didn't tell me you had a sister?
Oh, no, I said. She's not my sister. She's my best friend. Then Johnny yelled.
You can't fool me. Wait until I tell Thomas what you tried to do. You won't be happy.
Then he stopped yelling and stared right at us with his bulging eyes, and in a very eerie, calm voice said,
It's clear you're sisters. You have the same flesh.
And he walked away, muttering angrily. We were both really freaked out at this point, and my husband was due home soon. We decided to both walk to a nearby store to buy milk, and as we did, a neighbor from across the street approached us. She explained that Johnny was a shady character, and the house we bought was in fact his late sister's house. But she hadn't just died all those years ago. She had been murdered in a very brutal fashion. She mentioned nobody had ever been brought to justice, as it was so long ago, and no one was ever a suspect in such a small village. Everyone, except Johnny. She said no one trusted him, but he apparently was questioned by the police and released without charge. I mentioned his brother Thomas, and she looked bewildered and said Johnny has no living family, and he never had any brothers at all. I was totally freaked out by this information, and hurriedly rang my husband to tell him. He agreed Johnny was dangerous and possibly mentally unstable due to some undiagnosed medical issue like schizophrenia or something, but he made him uneasy, especially as we had young kids. The next couple of weeks involved Johnny yelling at Thomas some more and smashing plates on the floor every night, screaming,
"Eat your dinner, Thomas, for God's sake. I've been cooking it all day. How dare you refuse?"
My husband said we would just ignore him and he might stop. My husband also bought his own lawnmower to take care of our grass. One morning, he was just setting it up when out of the corner of his eye, he saw Johnny staring at him through an upper story window. He could hear him muttering angrily, but he couldn't make out what he was saying. That night, things escalated. The kids had a sleepover at their friend's house, so we decided to paint inside and do some light renovation work. That night, there was a series of long, hard, angry knocks on the door. It was Johnny yelling, and in his hands was a shotgun, clutched so tight his knuckles turned white.
"I told you, I warned you not to touch the grass."
As he said the last words, he kicked the front door down. He stood out in the hallway, reeking of alcohol and cigarette smoke. I genuinely thought we were both going to get shot. My husband tried to talk to him, but it was no use. He was getting angrier and angrier until he just abruptly stopped. He stared straight ahead, looking past us, and said,
"I need you to bring me home. I don't feel well."
I protested, but my husband said to call the police, so I did. They took it very serious, seeing as there was a gun-wielding maniac in my hallway only moments ago, and now my husband had agreed to walk him just as far as his front door, not leaving my sight as I stayed on the phone to the police. As Johnny opened his front door, my husband said he caught a glimpse of the hallway. The walls were covered with yellowing newspaper clippings of the death of his sister, hundreds of them. He even had crude drawings my husband couldn't make out. My husband literally ran and jumped the wall dividing our homes. When he'd done that, he walked on the grass. Johnny came out with his gun and aimed right at him, and just as he did, 2 police cars showed up. Their timing was remarkable. Johnny had to be tased twice, but was eventually overpowered. All the time, yelling he didn't kill her, his sister. The court case is still pending, so I changed his name for obvious reasons. He's being investigated for his sister's death, as there's now been breakthroughs with DNA, and he's still aggressive and manic in jail apparently. He keeps saying Thomas will die without him. Who will look after Thomas? His house now lays empty and unloved. The once manicured lawn is now overgrown and wild. It has a creepy feel about the place, and the newspaper clippings still remain on his hallway wall. I'll update more once I get any new info. Around 3 years ago, I was residing in West Oakland, California, between downtown and Lower Bottoms. It was a relatively quiet neighborhood, especially late at night when I'd be up enjoying some music and a few beers. It wasn't a safe area by a long stretch, but gunshots were few and far between, and I hadn't experienced anything too sketchy in a while. On this particular evening, I was hanging out naked in my bed, smoking weed. It had been dead quiet until a woman's screams abruptly cut through the silence. I immediately shot up, and adrenaline began coursing through my body. The screams I was hearing were unlike anything I'd heard a human make before. These made my blood run cold. This woman was in serious fucking trouble. Fight or flight kicked in, and I went with fight. I scrambled to throw on a shirt and some pants, followed by my Doc Marten boots, the official boots for ass-kicking. My hands were visibly trembling while grabbing the machete next to my bed, and rushed outside. I'm a young woman living alone without a gun, so I assume standing naked in the middle of my room with a machete is my best line of defense if someone were to break in. It's around 2 a.m., and these screams are not subsiding. They are desperate. They are filled with agony and fear. I can only imagine this woman is getting stabbed to death or something along those lines. I would run towards where I thought the screams were coming from. stop to listen closely, and then redirect myself to attempt to get closer. These went on for what felt like 5 minutes. No one else had bothered coming outside to see what all the commotion was. I'm beginning to feel hopeless on top of knowing I could get seriously injured or possibly killed when I find this guy. Suddenly, an extremely powerful voice exclaims,
"Get the fuck off of her!"
You could hear it in his voice that this was one big, strong black dude who was not playing around. Then, as quickly as the screaming started, everything went as quiet as before. You could hear a pin drop. There were no more screams, no fighting, no talking, just nothing. I stood there for several minutes trying to calm my ass down, and then I began to walk back to my apartment. It was as if nothing ever happened. I felt like I was in a dream. I left that apartment soon after due to an attempted break-in. Let's not meet dumbasses who don't know how to efficiently use a crowbar. Followed by my next-door neighbor being a peeping Tom late one night. I've moved on from all of those things, but those screams will always haunt me. I think about them often and wonder if she made it. This is an encounter my mother had shortly after I was born. It takes place in the mid-1980s in central London. It's early summer, and being London, this means hot and muggy. Some background. I'm my mother's firstborn, though not first pregnancy. The women in my family have health issues, which means we are prone to miscarriages, and pregnancy is basically hell. Right before falling pregnant with me, my mother had experienced her first miscarriage, and well, she was not in the best state of mind. She was incredibly depressed and fearful that something would go wrong with me. This was not helped by the fact that she didn't even have a bump until she was 8 months gone. And rather than gain weight, she had lost it due to extreme morning sickness, and it dropped from a UK size 8 to 10 to a UK 4 to 6. Additionally, during my birth, she had required resuscitation after almost dying from complications, and I had been born with some health issues. So all in all, she was not a healthy pup, and neither was I. But at least I slept a lot, so she got to rest at least. Anyway, at this point, I'm about 6 weeks old, and my mother is still really ill and run down, but she needs to sort out a passport for me so she can show me off to her family in Spain before we moved abroad to Israel. My dad is Israeli and had been offered a job back home. However, at the time, and being the age I was, the only option was to put me on either my dad's or my mother's passports until I was older. Since my dad was working all the time, this meant going to the Spanish embassy. My mother is Spanish, and getting my name added to my mother's passport. So a hot and muggy day in London, the Spanish embassy is incredibly slow at doing anything and spent ages messing my mother around before finally telling her she needs to come back the following week to complete the passport process. My mother isn't happy, and she is ill and fed up, plus she has me in a papoose across her chest, which only adds to the heat. She goes down the steps to the tube platform so she can catch the tube home, but there are delays, so she has to wait. Around her are a mix of people, but mostly men in business suits. She doesn't notice the tall, heavy-built guy staring at her until he's by her side. He starts trying it on with her, telling her how he could show her a good time, and if she was up for it. My mother glares, points to me in the papoose, and sternly tells him that she's a married mother, and in no way is she interested in him or anyone else for a good time. The guy starts getting more aggressive with his approach, keeps telling her how he's going to give her a time she'll never forget, and starts trying to touch her. My mother pushes him away and tells him to back off. At this point, the other commuters are starting to notice something is up, but don't do anything. The guy then makes a grab for my mother and tries to pick her up and pull her towards the tube steps. He makes a go to reach for me in the papoose, so as to throw me off, and my mother at this point flips. Now, the way my mother describes it, she said it was like a red haze. All she knew was that I was in danger, and she was too ill and fed up to be pushed around by some rapey asshole. She yanked herself away from his grip and proceeded to start punching, scratching, and kicking the guy with all of her strength. She didn't care that she was barely chest height to him. She just wanted him away from her. The guy was screaming at her that she was crazy and he would kill her, but she kept on attacking him. The other commuters, after watching in shock for a few seconds, suddenly realized that they need to do something and step in to help my mother. The police are called, and the guy, now flat out on the ground, is arrested. My mother is shaking. She's still angry and wants to keep beating on the guy, but some of the commuters are holding her back, trying to calm her down. One of the commuters comes up to her and tells her that was the bravest and most stupid thing he's ever seen a woman do. She asks why, and he points to the guy as he's being taken away. He had a knife and had been trying to use it to stab her and me as she was attacking him. At this point, the reality of the situation has sunken in. This guy had wanted to essentially rape and kill her, and when she'd attacked, she had come incredibly close to having both herself and me killed. She burst into tears and was assisted home by the other commuters. In 2010, my hometown was shaken by disappearances. First, there was small children missing, new report every week. In the same month, a woman disappeared too, and people started speculating that it could be organ trafficking related. Everybody talked about a black Jeep SUV spotted in the days of the disappearances. My mom was working late in the center of the city, so I went to see her one evening. I stayed until 10 p.m. and decided to walk home despite her pointing out the danger in the city. I was determined to have a walk and assured her that it was safe, and people were all around the streets at that time. Other than the bus station where I saw a few taxis, there wasn't a living soul in front of me or passing cars. No noise except for the river. I had to pass a bridge then after 100 meters on the left of my street, just a couple of minutes to my home. As I walked on the bridge, I saw a black SUV Jeep parked right in front of me on the corner of the street. On the sidewalk, I had to pass. The second I saw it, the lights went off. I couldn't hear the engine in the distance, but I'm certain they shut off the engine so I wouldn't notice and then walk by. But without hesitation, I just turned around and continued to walk back fast. I was in the middle of the bridge. When I started to pass the bus station street with the taxis right in front of me, I slowed down to check, and the SUV was driving parallel to my walking. I watched the black glass until it sped off, and I waited for a while before sprinting home. Maybe a week later, I was on the phone with my boyfriend, walking home, and again, it wasn't late. As I passed the spot where the SUV was parked previously, I decided to pass my street on the right side because there were houses I could easily approach, just in case. As I was passing my street, I heard a car the second I was stepping on the right side, still on the phone with my boyfriend. The car pulled over on the sidewalk. I ran to the front yard of the first house. A man got out of the back door of the car and started approaching me. I was telling my boyfriend what was happening and went closer to the front door of the house. The man started yelling something at me in Albanian dialect and finally went back in the car and they sped off. There were 4 men in that car. I was 12 to 13 at the time, but I developed early. I was staying the night at my friend Rose's house, and her mom left us to care for her little sister while she went out for a few hours. Being the good babysitters we decided to head over to a local park with a playground to just hang out for a while and let her sister play. We'd been there about 30 minutes, and were just hanging out pushing her little sister on the swings, when 2 guys showed up and sat at a picnic table close to the playground. The first guy looked to be in his late teens, probably 5'10", short brown hair, brown eyes, and a medium build. But the other guy had to be in his early 30s. He was a very large guy, at probably 6'1", 250 pounds, and had a full beard, shoulder-length curly brown hair, and green eyes. We noticed when they sat down, but didn't really even give them a second thought, as apart from their obvious age and physical appearance differences, there was nothing that really stood out about them. till Chris, the older guy, decided to start a conversation with us. At first, he just asked us our names, gave us theirs, and asked what we were up to today. Still being the polite kid I was raised to be, I answered him, but kept my answers short and continued playing with Rosa and her sister on the swings. He kept asking questions like where we were headed later and whether we wanted to hang out with him and his nephew, the younger guy, whose name I don't remember, all while getting closer and closer to us as he was talking. We told him we were just going to go home after Rosa's sister was done playing and we weren't allowed to go anywhere else. He then offered me some sort of beer that he had with him and asked me if I smoked. I had never drank any kind of alcohol at this point, and I wasn't about to start then, so I declined his offer. He then told me how pretty I was and asked me if I had a boyfriend, and without skipping a beat, told me that he had recently just gotten out of jail and was looking for a girlfriend. I told him I didn't have a boyfriend, and I wasn't interested in having one either. During this whole interaction, he would occasionally address his attention to his nephew, and from the conversations they had, I quickly caught on that they were in a gang, which is when I actually started getting nervous, as even I knew that you couldn't mess with people in the local gangs, and knew we had to be careful about what we said and did. He was quiet for a bit after that, and I figured they were going to move on and go bug someone else, but I was wrong. He asked me again what we were going to do later, and whether we wanted to go hang out with them, telling us how much fun we could have and how they could buy us beer or whatever we wanted. I told him again that we couldn't go anywhere and we had to watch Rose's little sister, and he went quiet again. I know we should have just picked up and left right then, but I had just really started getting into my rebellious stage and thought we could handle these guys no problem, and they weren't really a threat. We weren't ready to go back to Rose's house yet, so we went and sat at another picnic table, thinking that if we ignored them, they'd get the hints and go away. Of course not. 1 minute later, Chris and his nephew came and sat with us. His nephew stayed at one end of the table, but Chris decided to come sit right next to me and start telling me again how pretty I was and how he could be my boyfriend, and we should just go hang out at his place or wherever I wanted to go. At this point, his nephew started looking kind of nervous. He was very casually chatting with Rosa, but I could tell he realized how young we were, and that his uncle was really starting to cross the line. He told me he thought that they should go do something else because Rosa and I couldn't go anywhere, but Chris wasn't having any of that. I don't remember what he said next, as he was still sitting next to me, but the next thing I know, he put his arm around my shoulders and pulled me into his side. I was completely caught off guard and didn't even know how to react. I'd never had an older guy that close to me, let alone touch me like that, and I had actually grown up quite sheltered. I know I should have at least pushed him away or done something, but I froze. He kept saying again and again how he could be my boyfriend, and he would take good care of me, asking me if I could go somewhere with him. I told him no, and started trying to slowly get out from under his arm without making a big deal of it. At that moment, I started getting scared, as he was getting pretty pushy, and I really didn't want to piss him off, as it was just us in the park, and I couldn't hear or see anyone else around. He wasn't having that, though. He pulled me closer to him again, and this time, he kissed me. It wasn't just a quick little peck. It was a forceful, lingering kiss that completely threw me off. My mind just started racing. I couldn't believe what had just happened. And even Rosa was just sitting there with a look of complete shock on her face. I decided I had enough of this, and we needed to get out of there. I pulled away one last time, and he told me again we should go somewhere to have some fun. He wasn't very creative, and just kept saying the same things over and over again, just wording them slightly different. It was now very obvious what he had on his mind. I told him that it was getting late and we had to get Rose's little sister home as her mom was going to be home soon. He didn't seem very happy with hearing that, so I told him that maybe we could take her little sister home, but maybe we could come back and hang out with them some more. Finally, I guess he either believed me or decided to let me get up, so I grabbed Rose's little sister to carry her home. I just turned around and was getting ready to tell Rosa that we had to leave now, and suddenly he seemed to have changed his mind, stood up, and came over to me. I just put Rose's little sister down for a moment, as she was getting kind of heavy for me, and I knew we had a ways to walk, so I wanted to give my arms a break for a second. He took that opportunity to grab me from behind and pull me into him, kind of like a bear hug with his whole body pressed up against mine. A whole flood of emotions ran through me at that moment. Fear, confusion, and still a bit of denial that he really would do something to hurt me. But I knew it was wrong either way and needed to get away from him. I was still in a kind of state of shock at this time, but knew I had to keep my wits about me. I decided to play along like I liked him and try to work out a way for him to let us leave without making him mad or think I was lying to him. I told him again that we had to go, that Rose's mom would get mad and come looking for us, but I promised him that we would just drop her sister off and come back. I told him again, as convincingly as I could, that we had to take Rose's sister back home, and I promised him that we would come back and told him to just wait for us there. He seemed to have bought it, so we quickly started walking back to Rose's house, while he and his nephew were now sat at the table. As we started walking, I glanced back and saw his nephew trying to get him to leave again. So I thought, great, they're leaving, so there's no way they're going to see where we are, follow us. Wrong. Just as I thought they were leaving in the opposite direction, Chris decided to follow us. We had a bit of a head start, but he was a really big guy and was gaining on us quickly. We hurried as fast as we could because we didn't want him to see where she lived. So once we got on her street, we took off running. We finally got back to Rose's apartment and thought we were in the clear. I could hear Chris calling me, but I couldn't see him, so I thought they couldn't see us. So we went inside as quickly and as quietly as we could. Once inside, we went over to the window and could still hear Chris calling my name and getting really close. So we decided to stay quiet and carefully watch from the window to see if they had seen where we went. Luckily, they kept on walking right past Rose's apartment. We both breathed a huge sigh of relief and then started freaking out because neither of us had ever had anything like this happen before, but we were so glad it was over and we were in the clear. Shortly after that, Rose's mom got home and we went out to meet her in the parking area. Neither of us had any intentions of telling her what had happened, as Rose's mom wasn't the nicest, and we were sure we would get in trouble even though we hadn't done anything wrong. We all got back upstairs and were chatting with Rose's mom and little brother, and then we heard a knock at the door. My heart stopped as I could swear I heard Chris's voice on the other side of the door. We both went back in the kitchen as Rose's mom went to answer the door. It was Chris and his nephew again. Somehow they must have seen us when we went out to meet her mom and seen which apartment we went into. They asked Rose's mom if we were there, but luckily we were smart enough to give them fake names. And even then, Rose's mom was having none of that. Told them to get the hell out of there and slammed the door in their face. Of course, Rose's mom knew something was up and asked us if we knew them, but we weren't about to admit what we did, so we just told her we had no idea what was going on or who they were. I don't think she really bought it, but she left it at that and just told us not to answer the door. Later that evening, her mom was going out again, but this time we didn't have to watch her little sister, so it was just Rosa and I in the apartment. We were just hanging out in the living room, talking about how crazy that afternoon turned out to be, and how glad we were that we didn't get into trouble. And then we hear it. Two voices that sound very familiar just outside of the window. I was terrified to even move, and then came the knock at the door. There was no way we were answering it, so we just kept as quiet as possible and prayed they'd go away. They called out our names and tried knocking again, and then one of them tried turning the doorknob. Thankfully, Rose's mom had locked it on her way out. They tried knocking one more time, and then all you could hear is their footsteps walking away from the door. We never saw either of them again. We didn't go back to that park again for quite some time. It was an incredibly surreal experience. However, I will never forget his face, the feel of his body against mine, or that he tasted like cigarettes and beer. The story takes place when I was 14, female, now 23. It was late summer, and I was coming home from hanging out at the beach for my best friend Mia's 17th birthday party. When I got off the subway at my stop, I looked at the bus arrival screen. The bus I would normally take home was arriving in an hour. Being a tired 14-year-old girl, I decided to take an alternate bus route home. This was a decision I would later regret. When I got off the bus at my stop, I have about a 10-minute walk to my building. My area at night is pretty quiet, not many cars on the streets. As I'm walking up the street, I hear the sound of an engine nearby. I look over my left shoulder, and I see a white panel van. I know, how typical, rolling up the street. I tried to think nothing of it, but when I turn onto my street, the van does too. I'm now unsettled and start walking faster. This van is driving slowly and never passes me. When I turn up the long driveway to my building, the van once again turns too. Now I'm scared. The driveway to my building has an ice rink on the side of it with bright lights, so I walk beside the rink under the bright lights. The van catches up to me and stops. So I think maybe this person is lost and trying to ask for directions. I was trying to find some way to rationalize this. I stop. Stay about 4 feet from the van just in case. I look in the van window to see an older man starting to bald with black hair and a white t-shirt. I ask if they're lost. They don't respond. Instead, they try to get me into their van. I say no and start walking, but the van continues to drive slowly following me. When a red car begins to drive down the driveway, the van drives all the way to the end of the driveway and waits for the red car to turn before reversing to be beside me again. The man is still trying to get me in the van. I want to make a mad dash for my building, but I'm worried he'll see where I live, so I keep walking. When another car comes down the driveway, the van does what it did before, drive to the end and wait for the car to leave. But this time, there's a cab dropping someone off at the townhouses. The cabbie is closing his trunk when he sees me. "Are you okay?" he asks. I tell him how the van has been following me, and every time a car comes, the van drives to the end and waits for it to leave before following me again. The cabbie tells me he'll get in his car, drive to the end of the driveway, and sit there for a bit so I have enough time to run to my building. I tell him okay and thank you. The van is back in line with me again, so the cabbie gets in his cab and drives up the driveway. The van follows. I look and see the 2 vehicles sitting there. I run up the rest of the driveway into my building's lobby. My heart is racing. When I get to my apartment, I'm still freaked out. I go to my room and call the cops. While I'm on the phone with the cops, I look out my bedroom window and see the van. It's slowly driving around my building looking for me. Now I'm fully panicking. The cops send officers to sweep the area, but they don't find him. 2 officers came to my apartment to get a statement from me. About a week after this happened, the officers come back to my apartment. They show me a photo of the man from the van that they were able to get from the security camera on the side of my building. I told them that the man in the photo was the one that followed me. They told me that they found him and that he was being put on the sex offender list. So to the man in the white panel van, let's not meet. I grew up in Australia. When I was in high school, I used to get the bus home from school every day. The bus stop was about a 10-minute walk from my house. I did this walk every afternoon by myself. It was always quiet. I remember this day vividly. It was 2009, and I was 13 or 14 years old. Can't remember what time of the year this happened, but I was in year 8 in high school. I got off the bus, and there was this tall, dark-haired man wearing a gray trench coat. I think he was also wearing makeup, standing at the bus stop when I got off. I thought to myself that he looked creepy, and it was strange. I'd never seen him before. He smiled at me, and I put my music on through my earbuds and began walking home like any other day. When I walked down the alleyway to my street, I started to get this weird sense like something was wrong. I turned my music down and could hear loud footsteps behind me. I was too scared to turn around, so I started walking faster. I finally turn around. It was the creepy dark-haired man from the bus stop. I felt my stomach drop. He was about 5 meters behind me and yelled something out to me, but I couldn't understand it. He either yelled, "I'm gonna rip you," or "I'm gonna rip you," really loudly. I sprinted home in shock and didn't turn back. The song playing through my earbuds while I was running home was Ready or Not by the Fugees. I'm 25 years old now, and this has always haunted me. So this was back around the time I graduated, or sometime shortly after, in '95. My family lived in Michigan at the time, fairly close to the Indiana border. Some friends that I played D&D with got all into ghost hunting and whatnot, and we'd often travel down around the Indiana side, which was about 45 minutes away, I believe. On this particular night, we'd picked up the girl I was dating. Her and I were sitting in the back seat, while my two buddies were in the front seat. We were on a somewhat secluded 2-lane road, with thick woods on the right side of us. I'm not trying to be vague at this point. I really don't remember much about the area or exactly where we were. And John says something to the effect of, "Don't trust what you see around here. I hear your eyes play tricks on you in this area." Almost on cue, we start seeing what basically looks like black fog, or shadows darting and swimming across the road, in the light of the headlights. We remain calm and keep going. Eventually, the road tees off to the right into the woods, and we take the turn. After about a quarter mile, the road either goes straight into gravel or tees to the left. We take the left. At this point, we're driving slow, maybe 5 miles an hour, and both girlfriend and I are looking out the passenger side window. I was on the passenger side, if that matters. And about 15 feet into the woods, I see what looks like a small, naked old man, hunched over, eating something bloody and messy. Its back was to us. My mind immediately went to folklore, and I think red cap as soon as I see it, even though it wasn't wearing a thing. I slowly turn to the girlfriends, because it's a bit much to see and not think you're batshit crazy, and her eyes are taking up her whole face. She's already all teared up, and they start streaming down her face when she looks at me. She's petrified. We both tell my friends in the front that we need to go. There's something in the woods. She's basically crying, and I'm fairly well freaking out too. The two in the front didn't see it, and they're frantic to know what we saw and want to drive by again, which the two of us want nothing to do with. So 100-ish yards later, the road turns to the right into the gravel, and the driver decides we're going to turn around here and go back the way we came. We get turned around, and as we start off the gravel, the car dies. Not a clutch issue. It was an automatic, and a pretty unexplainable engine quit. The girlfriend flat out starts screaming. The driver says to relax, tries to turn the engine over, and thankfully it starts. However, the moment the car turns over, headlights immediately turn on behind us. Mind you, it's pitch black out. There are no streetlights. It's a heavily wooded area, and we hadn't seen another car in who knows how long. Never mind the fact that our car and headlights were just facing where this car appeared when we were trying to turn around. At this point, everyone fairly well decides, okay, fuck this. We're obviously somewhere we shouldn't be. We're out. So we end up driving back to the area we saw the man. There's nothing there now. No little naked man. No deer. I believe it was a deer he was eating when I first saw it. We get to the area that first branched off to the gravel road when we first went into this area. As we approach this road, and the other car is following behind us, another set of headlights turn on from this gravel road as well. So in the car, there's the 4 of us all going, fuck, 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 fuck. Just believing we've stumbled onto some weird occult shit we didn't mean to, and all we wanted is to go back home now. We drive back out to the main 2-lane road that took us this way, and both cars go their separate ways, uneventfully. It's been over 20 years, and I still get chills thinking about this. The little naked gnarly man, all bunched over, eating the deer, is just as vivid as it ever was. A lot of weird shit happened when I was living in the Bridgman area. This was the most extreme, but I had about 20 years of unexplained experiences crammed into the 2 years I lived there. To describe the red cap further, from what I remember, it was naked. I believe it would have been maybe 3.5 feet tall if it stood upright, and really stocky. It was squatting down low, ass almost to the ground while it ate, and also somewhat hairy. There was blood all over its hands and forearms, and it was holding what looked like the leg of a deer. There was a mess of the rest of it at its feet. I had about a 3/4 view of it, mostly its back, and I didn't get a good view of its face. A little of it, as it glanced over its shoulder at us nonchalantly as we drove by, but I just remember it looked old and menacing, like a furious little 70-year-old man. Unnerving, to say the least. I figured this is a story some might get a kick out of. I've always been a big believer, and I've definitely felt or heard some stuff in the past, but my only full-body apparition experience was of a cat. One of the houses I lived in as a child was owned by an older couple that were hoarders with a bunch of cats. From my understanding, they were evicted, and when people came to clean the house out, there was trash piled 4 feet high in some areas, and while they were cleaning, a lot of deceased cats were found. After my family moved out, the next owners even found cat skeletons under the house. At the time I lived there, we had one pet cat who was a big fluffy gray and white Maine Coon. I always thought I would see cats out of the corner of my eye, or hear meows that didn't quite sound like my cat, but it was never enough that I couldn't convince myself that my brain was playing tricks on me. One day, I'm sitting at our office at the computer. We had an L-shaped desk with a drawer on the right side. I was just relaxing when out of the corner of my eye, I see what I think is my cat walking under the desk by my feet. I say hi to my cat, and then do one of the biggest double takes of my life, because it's not my cat. This cat is skinny, short-haired, white, and transparent. I could see the black background of the desk through it. The cat looks up at me, and when I fully look at it, meows, and then walks through the drawer on the right side of the desk. Like fully just walks through the wooden drawer like a ghost on TV, phasing through a wall. I'm pretty sure I just sat there, dumbfounded for a minute, before going and finding my actual cat, who was not in the room. I never saw that ghost cat again, but I did always feel like there were many around while I lived in that house. When we moved a few years later, I was so sad to see it go, as I never felt anything negative from that house. I'm sure those cats just wanted a friend, and having a kid in the house who loved animals and was open to that stuff probably made them feel happier. I want to preface this by first stating that the story I'm about to tell is 100% real. There's no fabrication in what you're about to hear. Multiple people witnessed this encounter, and while I to this day consider myself a skeptic of the paranormal, I cannot for the life of me explain this. I haven't told this story pretty much to anyone outside of my immediate friend group, so forgive me if my storytelling is a bit rusty. In the early 2010s, I went to college in Boston, and for my 4 years at the school I attended, I lived on campus in an old dorm building. The 13-story building was constructed in 1917, and prior to the school purchasing it in the mid-90s, it served as an illustrious office space and shopping center. What I mean to say is, this building has a lot of history, and a lot of people had walked within its walls. Fast forward to 2011, my sophomore year of college. I lived in a 5-person dorm suite with 4 other roommates. We had a common room area where we'd all hang out and watch TV. That space contained a massively large window that looked across the way, further down our floor's hall to the adjacent suite, in which 5 girls from our class lived. Their suite had a similar large glass window that looked into their common room. From their common room, when the blinds were pulled up, they could see directly into our common room, and we could see into theirs. One night, me and my suite mates, Jack and Mike, are all sitting in our common room sharing a pizza and marathoning kung fu movies. I want to mention here that Jake and Mike are two of the most well-read and most intelligent people I've ever known. Both of these friends of mine are not privy to believing in anything supernatural or beyond the realm of our known reality. This is important to note for later. Anyway, it's late, around midnight. We're watching movies and devouring pizza. At the time, all three of us were more or less straight edge, so there was no consumption of drugs or booze going on as well. We were stone cold sober, unless you count the magical high of both pizza and martial arts. We're watching the movie, when out of the window, I catch the motion of something moving across the way. We all notice it, and look over at the common room of the suite adjacent to ours. We can see it clear as day. The lights had been left on at the girls' common room, so it was very easy to see the entire room clearly from our perspective. As we're looking, we see what appears to be a member of the school's custodial staff walking through the middle of the girls' suite. He looks late middle-aged, balding, wearing coveralls with a utility belt. It wouldn't have been that odd, except for the fact that the school's custodial department is closed early, like before 9 p.m., and no custodians make calls beyond that time. Beyond that, the school had recently sent out warnings about unhoused people sneaking into the dorm buildings from the streets and entering unlocked dorms. I immediately pointed out how weird it was that this guy was in the girls' suite at such a late hour of the night, and when the custodial staff were supposed to be off the clock. Maybe it was a plumbing emergency? I remember Mike suggesting. Could be, I replied, but something still felt off about it. It was weird, and given that the girls who lived in the suite were friends of ours, and none of them appeared to be around while this guy was passing through their common room, we felt compelled to go confront the guy and ask what he was doing in an all-girls suite at midnight. Mike, Jake, and I ran out into the hallway, hoping we'd catch the guy before he got on the elevator. The girls' suite in question was right across the hall from the elevators. There was about 6 elevator shafts, but only 4 of the shafts were actually functional and in use. The other 2 elevator shafts were vacant, and the doors of those shafts were gated off, so no one could ever possibly open or enter them. As we found ourselves out in the hallway, looking down towards the elevators, we see this guy, this custodian, walking straight towards the elevators. We quicken our pace to catch up to him. He's close enough that we can clearly see him, but we're maybe 6 to 7 doors down from where he's walking. As we close in on him, I call out, "Hey, man," hoping to get his attention. I'll never forget this, and it gives me chills thinking about it to this day. He never responded to that. I was maybe 50 feet away from him, and he never turned his head or acknowledged us there. There was no one else in the hall at that hour but us and him, and he acted like he couldn't hear or see us. And then he seemingly got into the elevator. Only when we reached the exact spot where we had clearly seen him step into, we realized he had stepped into one of the vacant, closed elevator shafts. Our minds were reeling. Both Mike and Jake tried to make logical sense of what we had just witnessed. Maybe we just thought we saw him get into this one, but it was just a trick of perspective, Jake suggested. But that was impossible. If that had been the case, the doors of that elevator would have closed by the time we reached where we saw the man walk. The doors always took more than 5 full seconds to close, and we had reached the spot where he vanished long before that was over. It was probably less than 3 seconds. All 3 of us stood there, completely perplexed. To this day, I can't fucking explain it, and Jake gets annoyed if I bring it up. I think largely because he's an extremely rational person, and yet he can't explain it either. It was beyond strange and weird. And this guy wasn't transparent. He didn't look like ghosts do in the movies. He was solid, or so it seemed, fully clothed, flesh and blood, and yet, this man vanished into the wall. He stepped into a closed elevator that could never have opened to begin with. The next day, I saw one of our friends who lived in that suite as I returned from class. "Hey, I have a weird question to ask you," I started. Did you guys by any chance call a custodian to your suite last night? Around midnight? Did you have like a plumbing emergency? Or did anyone lock their keys in their room or something? A puzzled and almost scared look spread across her face the second I asked this. No, she replies. We were all in bed by then. We all had super early morning classes today. At this moment, I'm even more freaked out, and she could see it on my face. Why? She asked. I told her about the man and everything we had seen, which predictably freaked her the fuck out. But she said it was possible one of her suite mates had indeed called an emergency, and so she said she'd check with all of them and see if any of them did. She did check, and no one had called anyone to the suite that night. I have no clue what we saw or what we experienced that night, but it has deeply disturbed me ever since. I've never had any sort of supernatural encounter before or after this happened, but this remains to be one of the strangest, most unsettling experiences I've ever had, and to this day, none of us are able to explain it. It was as if this man the three of us all saw wasn't there at all. This primarily happened to my mom, but this has badly affected me mentally with worry. She wanted me to post this just to give people a heads up that you can encounter creeps literally anywhere. This is going to be long-winded, I'm sorry, but I just wanted to get in every detail possible. This happened last month, and we still don't actually know what happened with Jeremy in the end. I'm a 19-year-old female who is studying in university in England. Entering my second year last month, we decided to stay in my university town the day I was due to move into my student home, so I could get there early and move my stuff in and give me the rest of the day to relax before we started Freshers Week. The night before moving day, me and my mother stayed in a hotel located in my university town. We were greeted by a very friendly man called Jeremy. Jeremy was very attentive and showed us to our room and stayed around 10 minutes telling us the history of the hotel and repeatedly asked us if we needed help unpacking and stuff, which we kindly rejected. It was a Friday, so me and my mother went around town and had a few drinks. Nothing too heavy, as Freshers Week started the next day, so I wanted to be fresh for the Saturday night. Before going out, Jeremy explained that he never works weekends, so he told us to have a good night and wished me luck with the rest of my university journey. He gave me a hug and gave my mother a hug and a slight kiss, whilst moving his hand down towards her bum, which she found weird, but brushed it off as nothing. My mom's 37, but looks young for her age, and Jeremy is easily in his 40s, so we just thought Jeremy may have fancied his chances with her. Moving on, me and my mom have a great night around town. We watch a couple of live bands and have a few wines, so we're a little on the tipsy side. We get back to the hotel, and the bar is still open, so we decided to have a nightcap. Whilst we're having a drink at the bar, Jeremy emerges from the back room, spots us, and makes a couple of jokes. Jeremy then proceeds to watch a video on his phone on full volume of a woman screaming at the top of her lungs as if she was being murdered. The screaming was blood-curdling and made me and my mom unsettled, and also another couple at the bar looked a little concerned as well. The video went on for 3 to 4 minutes before Jeremy laughed and went into the back. When we made our way to bed, my mom had taken her shoes off after they had become painful after dancing at the bars earlier. Jeremy emerges from the back room and puts his arm around my mom and says,
"Oh, let me help you to your room, honey. You must be wasted after all of that drinking."
My mom isn't actually that drunk and insists she's fine, but Jeremy persists and basically follows us to our room and proceeds to come in, but I bid him goodnight and close the door pretty much in his face before locking it. The next morning, we are up early and make our way down for breakfast. The young girl working takes our breakfast order, only for Jeremy to bring them out insisting the eggs are cooked to perfection, although he claimed he never worked weekends. Me and my mom are weirded out by Jeremy at this stage and check out straight after breakfast. Jeremy sees us out and says these exact words,
I'll be seeing you very soon, Christy.
My mother's name. Anyway, at that time, it doesn't strike me as unusual, and my mom drives us to my new home and helps me unpack and all that stuff. She helps me to unpack and then leaves in the early afternoon, as she had to work that evening in our local bar. The rest of the day goes by without much going on, but that night I'm out drinking with my housemates, and I get a call from my mom saying that Jeremy had just come in the bar where she works. This is no coincidence, as when we were having our nightcap, Jeremy would have heard us talking about the bar where my mom works, and he also had our address, which needed to be provided at the hotel for whatever reason. He had also said to my mom when she was pouring his pint that she should go around to his friend's house after her shift, which was just around the corner. This call really scared the shit out of me. About a half an hour later, my mom called me and said that Jeremy had left the bar after she rejected his offer to go back to his friend's house later. But Jeremy had said he'd be back for her later. This was really worrying, and I told her to make sure a customer was with her as she was locking up on her own that evening. After this call, I felt sick and didn't join my friends in going to the nightclubs. In the meantime, I called my dad, who no longer speaks to my mom. They aren't on bad terms. They just chose not to keep in contact with each other after they split up a few years ago. My dad is a club bouncer, but he wasn't on duty that night. I called him and begged him to just drive down there and make sure everything was okay. My dad clearly knew by my shaky voice that I was panicked, scared, and helpless. 1 a.m. rolled around, and I didn't get a response from either my mom or my dad's phone. I was worried sick and hoped that Jeremy hadn't been waiting around a corner and done something to my mom while she was locking up. At 1:30 a.m., my mom finally rang me in hysterics. As she had been locking up, Jeremy had pulled up in a car with 3 other men and shouted to her to get in the car for a ride. My mom declined his advances, and he got out of the car and approached her. He told her he won't tell her again. He said she had been flirting and teasing him ever since she checked in last night. She told Jeremy that's complete bullshit, and she wasn't at all into him. As Jeremy got closer to her, she could smell heavy liquor. As Jeremy went to grab my mom, my dad pulls up behind the car and beeps his horn. This causes Jeremy to go back to the car, climb back in, and tells my mom that he knows where she lives, and he'll be waiting. The car screeches off. My dad then gets out of his car and tells her that I told him to check on her. Scared to go home alone, she asks my dad to drop her off at my grandmother's. She didn't want to be alone. After that night, we never saw Jeremy again, but my mom did make a report to the police about him and gave them a full account of what happened, but she hasn't heard back from them. I'm just so relieved that my dad turned up to the pub when he did, as Jeremy would have easily been able to get my mom into that car. She's very small in stature, 5'2", and around 120 pounds. I just hope that scumbag got what was coming to him and is behind bars. My mom has been pretty badly affected by this and is only now comfortable being alone in her house. So Jeremy, I hope you rot in hell, and let's never, ever meet again. This happened a few summers ago when I was living in Montreal. I lived in Mile End and worked in the Plateau, 2 adjacent neighborhoods that were usually full of tourists, students, and people just hanging out. I walked to and from work through a series of pretty tree-lined alleyways that were peaceful, quiet, and full of cats. Anyone familiar with the area will know the kind of alleyways I'm talking about. I always felt safe because there were so many people hanging out on their back balconies, overlooking the alleys in the summertime. Occasionally, I ran into people strolling with their dogs or kids, messing around, or drunk dudes would catcall from their balconies. But typically, my walks to and from work were uneventful. That is, until this day. I left work at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon and began my walk home. After I crossed Mont Royal, a main street, I could pretty much take one long alley walk all the way home, so that's what I did. I didn't have my headphones in or anything. I was just walking and daydreaming and taking in the beautiful summer afternoon. I didn't sense a single thing was off. I walked for about 5 to 10 minutes before I heard someone yelling from their balcony up ahead. My French is pretty bad, and they were far up, so I didn't catch any specifics. I ignored it and kept walking. 2 minutes later, and this big guy comes bursting out of the back gate and into the alley, talking hurriedly in French to me. When he realized I'm Anglo, he switches to English and says quietly, "There's somebody following you. He came into the alley behind you, and he's been ducking behind garages and garbage cans. We could see him from our porch." He points up to where his companion is still sitting, a few stories up on a little balcony with a pretty good view down to the alleyway. I was hesitant and said it must be someone walking their dog or something, and that I hadn't seen or noticed anyone behind me. I didn't really know what to make of the situation, but I thought he must be mistaken. The man shakes his head and yells down the alleyway to get the fuck out of here, or something to that effect. But nothing happens. Nobody appears. So we start striding down the way I came, and that is when a man stands up from where he was hiding, ducked behind the wall of someone's garage. He was skinny, had long brown scraggly hair, and a leather jacket on, even though it was like 30 degrees Celsius outside. I made eye contact with him for a split second before he took off running back down the alleyway, and he had these wild, angry eyes that still give me the chills. The balcony Samaritan booked it after him, but the guy was gone, just like that. We weren't sure what to do, or what we would even say if we called the police, so balcony Samaritan walked me onto Park Ave, a close-by main road, and I thanked him profusely for saving me from whatever the alley stalker had planned for me that afternoon. It still scares the shit out of me that I didn't sense a single thing was off. I didn't have any feeling of being watched. Nothing. Anyways, creepy man who ruined my peaceful alleyway commute. Let's never, ever meet again. When I was a child, my Fridays were spent at a program called Celebrate Recovery, CR for short. This program was for recovering addicts, and childcare was provided. My mom was the ringleader of the group, while my dad attended as an alcoholic and drug user. This being said, my whole life, I've been surrounded by people who have questionable pasts, and have always been taught to love every single one of them. This is great, but this one time, it bit me in the butt. I was 6 or 7, and I knew everyone at CR, and everyone knew me. An hour before the program started, people would come early, bring food, and as a messed up family, we would eat together. When a new person came, I would always introduce myself, and made sure that they knew that they were wanted there. I didn't know this one guy would take it too far. One night, there was a new person, and I ran up to introduce myself. He told me his name was Bob, and this began a very suspicious friendship. From that week on, Bob would bring stuffed animals for the other kids and me, but would leave the biggest one for me. He would also bring candy for us, and I found out years later that it was actually dipped in gasoline. This went on for weeks, and Bob gained my freely given trust. My parents were suspicious of Bob, naturally, and cautioned 6-year-old me to be careful around my new best friend. One Friday night, Bob came to CR telling me he had a surprise for me in the backseat of his car and for me to follow him. Stupidly, I followed him, and once we reached his car, Bob told me that he had a bad back, and if I wanted my surprise, I would need to climb into his car to get it. Right before I was about to reach into his car, my mom, my hero, was walking out of her office, saw the interaction, and screamed, "OP's full name, get your butt over here right now." Scared to get in trouble, I ran to my mom and walked back to dinner with her. Apparently, after that incident, my mom found out Bob would go to the large gatherings, but would not attend the breakout sessions. Instead, he would come to childcare, and the workers did not think this was a red flag. When my mom found this out, she went to the church and hired security. The officers told Bob he was no longer allowed to come to CR and posted officers outside the childcare. Sadly, this did not stop Bob. He would come to the Saturday night service at our church and would give the kids the gas-covered candy and stuffed animals, and even attempted to come back into the childcare multiple times. One night, my friends and I were playing, and when I looked up, there Bob was, staring directly at me. I had been told by my mom that if he was to show up to go to Miss Jamie, the childcare worker, I did just that, and even went as far as hiding in a corner until I was told he was gone. 13 years later, I'm still thanking my mom for being vigilant and stopping me from being kidnapped. Edit. So to clarify some things, I was talking to my mom today, and I asked her how she knew the candy was dipped in gasoline. She told me that our head pastor confiscated Bob's candy after church one day, and he told my mom the candy tasted and smelled as if it had been soaked in gasoline.